Bobby Kennedy III has written a book, The Confessions of Anthony Fauci. It hits the bookstores this week, and he joins us. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Armstrong. Wonderful to be here.
My pleasure. I read this book cover to cover. It reads like a script.
That's how it started out. I'm a filmmaker. I thought it would be interesting to make a Fauci movie. And then kind of when I was writing it, I was like, nobody's going to make this. So turned it into a book.
Turned it into a book. Talk about the game that you had to learn about and how it's really played.
I would say that, trust the science. That's kind of the game in this case. And really, what it is that there's certain areas of the science where the interested actors, be they corporations or parts of the government, kind of have captured the process in a way that distorts what the truth is. And they often do it very effectively. So it's hard to get to the bottom of, because people line up or people get in line and lie right to your face. And so you kind of have to dig a bit to figure out what the truth is. And I think that's the game, is the digging.
Well, does that mean that depending on who's in the White House, Republican or Democrat, there's less of a truth, more of the truth, or just the truth?
Well, to some extent, I believe in the concept of the uniparty, left wing, right wing, same bird. I've discovered this, especially since my wife started working in the government, but the deep state is very real. And they refer to the politicians that come through as temps, like temporary employees. So the people that are running the show are not necessarily the ones you see on TV all the time.
This is the deep state, the bureaucrats.
Exactly.
Talk about those bureaucrats.
Well, there's the classic concept of the revolving door, where they often end up in jobs after they do a period of, service in D.C., working for the exact people that they were trying to regulate. And so there's sort of an understanding, you scratch my back, and once you're out of here, I'll scratch yours. And I think that's kind of how a lot of our system works, unfortunately. We think we're in a democracy, and maybe we are on some surface levels, but a lot of the way the money moves is very undemocratic.
Talk about the rules that they don't say out loud.
The rules they don't say out loud are, it's kind of like Fight Club. It's like, don't talk about Fight Club. Number two, don't talk about Fight Club. I think a lot of people, when they picture, how the government works, they kind of think about some old video where the cartoon bill is trying to go through Washington. But the bills now are written by lobbyists who work for corporations, and then then deliver 3,500 pages of unreadable gobbledygook onto a senator or a congressman's desk. They vote without reading it. Nobody really knows how this thing works, and but it keeps the money moving out of the taxpayer's pocket and into theirs, essentially.
Talk about your discovery through the voice and the research of Anthony Fauci, that you learned about COVID-19, about the 6 feet social distancing, it's about the mask and whether you wear a mask and whether you wear a cloth mask. And then you discovered the Bat Cave Boys.
Yeah, I would say kind of the most important thing that I learned here was that, COVID-19 started out as essentially being funded as a bioweapons program. And once it was released, for whatever reason it was released, they basically had to make a bunch of stuff up to cover their butts, I'll say.
Now, we call that, from the country where I'm from, in the South, we call those lies.
They're horrific lies, but they're lies not just to, cover up they're not white lies. They are the darkest, dark, evil, completely defrauding, and for some reason, they seem to pop right back. They're never held accountable. And so, despite the fact that Fauci has essentially had a 40-year career of lying to the American public, he was kept in charge, and he was allowed to gracefully resign, whereas, instead of being thrown into jail, which is kind of where I think he should have ended up.
Talk about the damage on the Fauci's watch?
Incalculable. I mean, you're talking about potentially, if you think about the useful hours of wonderful life that he probably denied to people by either giving them heart problems or, or just simply taking the kids out of the schools or forcing, I mean, the mask thing, as you said earlier, look at the division that created in our country. I really think it's a similar to a 9/11 moment. We were a different nation before and after COVID-19. And the response and the way that he handled it, which was mostly just to preserve his own reputation, really just may destroy us forever. It might lead to the collapse of the Union. I think he's one of the most damaging Americans in history.
So you don't think they followed the science, they followed Dr. Fauci?
Yeah, I think that he famously said, "I am the science" at one point.
He did.
So there you go. He believes it. I think they, to some extent, they follow the money too. But there's the Institute of Science, protects itself just like in the same way that the military-industrial complex does, or kind of anything built on various layers of fraud. That there's a lot of money moving around. They're willing to lie. They convince themselves it's for the greater good. But I think the truth is the greater good in life. And when you have people that are willing to lie out of some misbegotten sense that it's going to protect you or it'll be better in the long run for the global population, they are often great crimes are committed. And certainly in this case, under that, kind of utopian ideal of, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, or it will be better in the long run if people trust the institution, so we have to lie to them now. That creates shockwaves that leads to kind of where we are now, where nobody really believes anything.
One of the things you've heard during the COVID lockdown was indoctrination. They want to control us. They want to take away our power. And then you write about the 6 feet apart was literally made up, but it gives insights to just how much they wanted to control, from the 6 feet apart to even the mask we were lied about. And they knew if you were to see someone on an airline wear a mask, a teacher wear a mask, or somebody sort of in a powerful position and wear the mask, then you believe that you got to wear it too for your own safety. And it was all a part of control.
Yeah, there's a theatrical element to it. Fauci openly admitted in a closed-door session of Congress that they basically just made that up. And, that the whole masking thing, in my opinion, is humans are naturally drawn to look each other in the face, right? So it's an instant way to be like, I'm in the group, you're not in the group. Because, some people simply didn't want to wear them. Fauci himself said masks do anything early on in, I believe, a 60 Minutes interview, because you're breathing into them, they get wet and soggy, the viral load there, or you're touching your face because the mask is itchy. He said that, and then he reversed course something like 2 weeks later. So there's a thing there where, he's lying to you. People who saw both those things kind of know he's lying, but you are still sort of forced to wear this thing as a social obligation to protect Granny or whatever it is. And it's a good way to kind of divide and conquer. I think it was purposefully used. It's very similar to tactics that are used in prison camps, and it's almost a form of hypnosis. Seeing your neighbor as the other, the enemy, is a very powerful tool, and we can sort of all look and see how damaging it's been.
A powerful point in your book, you spoke about how they closed the churches and the schools, but you talked about how they redefined death, how your loved ones died alone, how they were carting them out like garbage and piling them up, how you could only look at them through some glass. They became no longer human anymore. You lost that human touch. They were left alone to die, and how we accepted that.
It's astounding what people are willing to accept. I mean, I have a feeling that even a generation ago, or maybe before social media, that could have caused a revolution in this country, saying,
Yes.
you're not allowed to be around your dying father or dying mother. It's one of the most, aside from perhaps being born, it's the most important moment of someone's entire life, escorting the prior generation into the next life. But why is that denied to people? Was it really to protect them? I don't believe so. I believe that was to demoralize them, to create a sense of
To reduce them.
helplessness. To reduce them.
Yes.
And I think that makes you feel this kind of helplessness that ultimately makes you kind of roll over rather than rise up.
That is why you said in your book, run, death is near.
Mm-hmm. Agree. I mean, in the end, what's scarier than death? It's a wonderful tool for those who would seek to control us. But I think to some extent, we're now in a new world because people are waking up to the fact that they were lying to us, that they did not have the best intentions for us in mind. And maybe that, or at least I pray, that will allow us to create a brighter future for our children.
But Dr. Fauci was not alone. He was given this power. He was allowed it. People understood, but he was unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, and why? That's the big question. Yeah. I don't know.
Tell us what have you concluded? Why?
Well, I mean, I suppose that Fauci does not give me the criminal mastermind vibes. I think he's almost the fall guy for kind of a higher up group of people. And if you look at how many times similar things have happened across history, and you look at things like Event 201, where the kind of everybody got together on behalf of the Gates Foundation and such to plan out the response to the pandemic before the pandemic happened, you realize that we're probably dealing with a global power structure rather than something that's unique to America.
But you mentioned many of those institutions in your book, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet on Big Pharma and the drugs that they said was okay and was not okay, and then follow the money. Bobby Kennedy III is our guest. I've got to tell you something. It's one of the most fascinating books I've read, The Confessions of Dr. Anthony Fauci. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back with more.
Fifty, 60 years.
You know, I really want people to understand, and I don't use this word lightly, from what had happened during COVID to what will happen way into the future, it's like a Holocaust in and of itself. The kinds of things like heart attacks, cancer, disease, things that young people and others never had before, and such a level of having it among so many in the population. I don't think people really understand that COVID is still in many people.
Yeah, and the vaccine, which manufactures spike protein, which is most likely the cause of those heart attacks and myocarditis, especially in kind of young, healthy people, will basically continue to be produced in their bodies. They've essentially turned their bodies into a factory for life. That
they're almost like zombies.
Well, it's certainly. I think there was a mental hypnosis thing that turned people into zombies, but there was also there vast vaccine side effects that I think we'll be dealing with for the rest of our lives and possibly forever as a result of this. It's terrifying to think about, but if you kind of got that, if you got an mRNA shot injected into your bloodstream, that went to your heart, and I mean, it will reprogram your body to produce spike protein for the rest of your life, essentially.
But you said they always knew, which I wanted you to delve deep into, and that so much science is a scam.
Well, certainly the science around gain-of-function research is a scam. I mean, nobody in their right mind would think it's a good idea to take a virus that isn't, that can infect humans and combine it with a virus that can in a way to make something that kills, say, 60% of people transmissible in humans when previously it was only transmissible in pigs or birds or bats. But that's what they were doing. And not only were they doing that, but they were shipping it to China to do the research. You know, I don't think there's any excuse for doing it in the first place, but certainly there's no excuse in shipping that to our supposed adversary.
But you know why? There's no accountability. There's nothing to stop them. They don't have the regulations and the law and order in place. They're just like the Wild Wild West in China.
Yeah, but you know, apparently we're doing it here too. We sent them through Ralph Barrick at UNC, created a technique that allows you to hide the laboratory origins of viruses. It's called the no-seum technique. Why would you teach that to your adversary? It's insane. It's like giving them the plans to build a nuclear bomb and saying, yeah, and don't use it on us. You know, it defies logic.
But here's what, Bobby, I grapple with. Why harm and destroy your greatest asset, we the people, for generations to come, by, in the first place, allowing them to be part of this gain of function that you speak about. You resmerize the medicine, you lie to them about that, and you take away the medicine that actually works. Because if it works, you say it in your book, then they're not making money.
Yeah, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
And they even took away monoclonal antibodies, which were highly effective. That's, you know, what Trump took to get over his COVID so quickly. Why did they do that? It's probably surrounding this thing called an emergency use authorization, because if there are viable therapeutics to treat a disease, they can't force you to take the vaccine that they basically were running they were treating us as guinea pigs on. And I think there's something in there. They were clearly obsessed with pushing this vaccine on the entire world, even before COVID, and this was sort of the launch pad they used. Now, their intentions behind it.
COVID, you said, gave them the opportunity they've been waiting for.
Yeah.
And you talk about the needle and the lie.
And, you know, I think you have, if you look at this crazy Event 201, which was the tabletop simulation exercise they had pre-COVID in New York with the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, and you listen, and the CIA, you listen to what they're talking about. They're not talking about how to save lives or help people. They're only talking about how to control the narrative and get people vaccines. Nothing else. It's merely how to manipulate people without them getting out the pitchforks and torches and coming to kill us. That was all they talked about. No public health, no potential cures, no spillover. So they knew it was coming. They had a meeting. 2 months later, it happens. You know, I don't know how you can look at that and say these people were planning this operation and they don't have our best interests in mind.
You know, I'm asking so many questions. There's so many questions I want to ask, but I want to give you, in the time that we have left, to talk about aspects of the book that are so critical that people should be aware of.
Well, I think the most critical thing is that we don't allow it to happen again. People have to, realize that a lot of science in this country has become corrupted, and that, if you can look back to something as obvious as the food pyramid and how that worked, where all of a sudden you're supposed to eat carbs and, healthy protein is kind of in this little tiny box at the top. It's the same sort of organizations, the cereal companies basically paid them to do that. And that kind of refracts into almost every level of where science interacts with the government. There's always an interest behind it. There's always money to be made, and there's always people willing to take that money to lie right to your face. So I think that's kind of the take-home lesson here, is that, we have to be more open. We have this amazing thing called the internet now where people can learn facts themselves, and yet the things that affect our public policy are done behind closed doors.
Well, talk about, during this time of COVID, how anybody who was on this social media telling the truth and giving facts, they were canceled, they were shut, and encouraged by the Biden administration. Shut them down.
Yeah. I'm still banned from Instagram for posting a meme during COVID. But, basically the Twitter files came out. We realized that the Biden administration was basically directly pressuring people at the social media networks to censor facts, and to mute people who they termed the disinformation dozen, to basically mute anything they said to prevent this from getting out. So now, why does the Biden administration have such a stake in telling people, or in basically worrying about vaccine hesitancy? It doesn't really make sense. So there's other things at work here. Who are the donors? The Democratic Party at some point became the party, stopped being the party of the working people, and started being a big money party of Wall Street and pharma. I think you have to look at that first of all. But the government should not be telling people what they can and can't talk about. That's obviously the First Amendment. They use this excuse that Facebook or Twitter at that time were private companies and they're allowed to police their own gardens, so to speak. But when the White House is directly telling them who to squelch, you've got a real problem. That's not how this country's supposed to work. And luckily that information came out, because otherwise it would still be going on now.
Big Pharma.
Yeah. I mean, in general, you look at all the crazy things they've done. It's the biggest lawsuits paid out in American history. You got things like Vioxx kills who knows how many people, 80,000 I've seen before. And it's in their papers, like, this thing's still making money for us, so we're just going to accept a certain amount of death to make money. I don't think that you should, I think you should go to jail if you're willing to kill people to make money, right? But for some reason, they get away with it. I think that we need to return to fact-based medicine. I think they should stop being able to bury studies that are inconvenient. There's a great YouTube video called What Doctors Won't Tell You About the Drugs They Prescribe You that goes into how they kill studies. That's horrifying.
And how the doctors in the hospitals, because in the end they get lectures, they get gigs, they get paid, they know the truth, but they remain silent.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look at, they were getting paid bonuses per COVID death.
Yes, and that's crazy.
Crazy.
It's really crazy.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And
bonuses per COVID death.
And at some point, the clinics operate on such razor-thin margins that bonus will be the difference between you having to shut down or not. So is that a bonus, or is that like a trap?
Does anyone have a conscience anymore?
I think there's that old quote, right? Don't try to convince somebody to have a conscience if it gets in the way of their paycheck.
But you also said in your book, it's more than just about money.
That's my theory. I don't think that money alone could describe the depths of sort of depravity that people have gone to over this. I think there might be a ritualistic or even a cult angle to this whole thing. And that's for everyone to decide out there. But I think we're working with dark forces and people that don't have humans' best interest in mind.
Talk about the spreadsheet that people ruin. I mean, everything in your book.
Yeah, I mean, I think data has been corrupted in America, more or less. They they'll cut a group out. There's a famous book called How to Lie with Statistics, right? They know those tactics. You can make your study prove anything if you wanted to, and especially if you're allowed to run studies until you get one you like. So I think rather than this whole sort of trust science, trust the double-blind, placebo-controlled, blah, 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 we just need to have it out in the open so that everybody can look at the data and make their own conclusions, because we now have the power of human consciousness. Every single person in the world should be able to look at this data if you got an internet connection. Why will they not let you? I mean, look at what Pfizer tried to pass the thing to hide their vaccine trial data for 75 years.
And there's a reason.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
I think one of the things I just recall in your book that just really blew me away, we always talk about the leak, but in your book, you talk about the leak before the leak.
Yes. Now, that's an interesting one. And the fact is, I think a lot of people can look at that data and say, where did the flu go during COVID? There's a big question over that. Now, there are they stopped collecting flu data. There are tales of perhaps a big, obviously lab-made flu virus leaking from doctors in America. There's a lot of facts here, so I'll let people read the book. But essentially, there's a very good chance that there was a bigger virus out there that COVID was then kind of released intentionally to cover up, because the first one had a lot of bad fingerprints on it that could have caused a third world war.
You know, I got to say this. I know we're out of time with you, but I'm going to I got to say this to you, because you said the big pandemic is yet to come.
Well, you know, I think that they're still doing this kind of research.
Right.
It's been sent all over the world. Everybody knows the techniques, and we're getting to the point where they have unlimited deniability. So are they out there to kind of control the population? Do they want less people on Earth for some reason? Certainly their actions seem to speak that they do. And I think I would be very worried that unless we get this out-of-control deep state under control, we could be dealing with something much worse than a 5% death rate, which wasn't even true in the end. It was a 0.01% death rate or something, but we could be dealing with a big one.
You know, I got to say this. You are your father's son. You know, I mean, when you think about what he's criticized for and vilified as our Secretary of Health and Human Services, it's amazing that you've also, on your own, have come to the same conclusion.
Well, to some extent, I've been on the journey with him. You know, I've gotten to meet all the mothers of the vaccine-injured kids, and I've gotten to hear these kind of horror stories over the years. And I don't know how, when you hear it from that many people, I don't know how you could focus on anything else. It's one of the most self-destructive things that America has been up to all these years. And also, I always love chasing a good conspiracy. I mean, maybe that's in the blood as well because of the assassinations of RFK and JFK. But I feel...
and you never bought into that?
Well, I mean, in RFK's case, you know, Sirhan had 5 shots, or 5 chambers in his gun, and there's 7 shots fired. So what was going on there? There's certainly something up. I believe hypnosis plays a large factor in both of those things, because you know, neither of the so-called assassins seemed to remember what they had done, and they ended up getting essentially, I don't know. There's many strange things that happen in the world, and some of them have happened to us, but there's dark forces at work.
Well, we wish you well on your book. I really encourage people to go out and buy The Confessions of Anthony Fauci. It's so well written. It's like a conspiracy theory. It's like a script. It's like a novel. It's like a spy mystery. It's everything in one. He's a great writer, but he's a lot of compassion. He loves his country. And as a father, it's given you a whole different perspective on life and what the government is capable of. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Oh boy, from Bobby Kennedy III to Billy Carson's in the house tonight. Billy, man, it is so good to see you, brother. How art thou?
I am fantastic. I'm doing great. I'm living my best life. I'm creating, I'm helping, I'm healing, and just happy to be here, man.
So, you said study is the gateway to human power. What do most people misunderstand about the connection between knowledge and personal transformation, Billy?
Well, I think that most people don't realize that knowledge really doesn't have any power whatsoever. You can have all the knowledge in the world. I can sit in this room and I can digest thousands of books for the next 20 years. But if I never leave the room and apply anything that I've taken in and learned and discerned, I'll have no effect on the world on the outside of me. And so we come to understand that for self-improvement, the application of knowledge is power. Knowledge itself isn't power. Only when you begin to apply that knowledge can you begin to get an effect or a manifestation. And in that regard, that's when you actually enact your true power from the inside. And when you activate it on the inside, it will manifest on the outside.
We just had Bobby the third on, and as he's leaving, he was telling us what a big fan he was of yours, that he listens to you. But you got a chance to hear some of the knowledge and the wisdom and the research that he was unveiling in his new book. What were your thoughts on what you heard?
My thoughts is he's pretty much spot on. I'm glad that he wrote this book, the gain and function research. I've been looking into that for probably about 10 years now. I talked about it back in 2013, that it's something that we should not be involved in whatsoever. It's extremely dangerous. And when you begin to take these viruses and tinker with them and play with them and add sequences to them, all of a sudden you can create something very deadly. And to me, in my opinion, it was, first of all, it was denounced and told not to be done, and then it was done anyway. Then it was funded. Then they ended up in Harvard with Professor Lieberman over there at Harvard and two espionage exchange students from China. And then all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, why is this happening and how is this happening here? So it lets you know that there's a bigger force behind the scenes. So I believe that Kennedy Jr., Kennedy III is right, that there's something going on behind the scenes that is dark and orchestrating and pulling the strings, allowing a lot of these things to unfold. To what end, to what agenda, and why? I heard you ask that last question. I really can't understand why they would unleash something like this, except for the purpose of generating extremely large amounts of revenues, creating fear. It's like they create the problem, wait for the reaction, and provide the solution. And this seems to be their recipe since time immemorial.
It brings us back to the knowledge. Why do people avoid knowledge, Billy, even when ignorance costs them sometimes their life, their health, their future, their well-being? Why?
It's programming. A lot of it is programming. So we don't realize that at the time of gestation, when we're inside of the womb, the programming process begins in the embryonic stage. And what programming is that? That's the food that the mother is eating. Those are the sounds outside of the womb, whether it's toxic sounds, toxic vibrations, even the type of music that she's listening to. All that begins to then program the developmental stage of the embryo. Then when you come out of the womb, from the ages of 1 to 7, scientifically proven by geneticists, that creates your personality traits from 1 to 7. And what are we getting? We're getting a lot of programming. We're getting programming from TV. We're getting programming from our parents and our relatives and the school system and everything else going on. And those are pre-designed dogmas that are given to us. Like I say all the time, when you're born, you're given a name, a race, and a religion, and you spend the rest of your life defending a false identity. At the end of the day, most people truly do not know who they are and what they're really all about. They're only going by what the code they were given, and they'll defend that code to the death because it's been embossed into them. It's like part of their belief system. And then once something, if you put a tree, for example, and the roots begin to grow around a stone that's on the ground or the sidewalk, it wraps around that sidewalk so hard that if you begin to try to remove that chunk of stone or that chunk of brick, it actually will break some of those roots. It actually hurts the tree. So when you begin to rip away these belief systems from people by bringing in new information with new evidence, it hurts them in a mental and psychological way, and they don't want to let go what they've been forced to believe. They've believed in it so wholeheartedly all their lives, it becomes part of their identity.
So, what happens neurologically, Billy, and spiritually when a person commits to daily study?
Oh, incredible growth happens. When you commit to daily study, even if you just spend 20 to 30 minutes a day of doing study and research, you're ahead of 90% of the world, because now you're doing something that hardly anyone's taking the time to do, and you're finding information, and it's allowing you to then create new neural connections in your mind. It's like lifting weights. So if you lift weights, you literally build muscle. How do you build muscle? Well, the muscle cells, they separate and they divide, and then they heal and they grow. That's how you build mass. But if you don't do any working out at all, your muscles will atrophy and actually shrink down. In your brain, it's the same exact effect, because we're just a fractal. Our minds need exercise. And when studies were done to show that when you're not studying and doing research, you're not keeping your brain active, doing puzzles and quizzes and things like that, challenging the mind, that's when a lot of atrophy, cognitive atrophy, starts to seep in. And then you start to actually, things like dementia and Alzheimer's and all these other things, you become more susceptible to them. Not that it's triggering that, but you become more susceptible to them, and memory loss, because you're not really exercising the mind. We all should be exercising our mind on a consistent basis.
I'm going to ask you something interesting. Talk about the mind of the President of the United States and Donald Trump. I don't know in recent memory any president within the first year of a term has ever been able to come and take such control of the government and so many institutions on every level. Explain to what his power is.
Well, a lot of people think that he's crazy and he's just rambling. Now, that's the illusion that he wants to give. The thing you have to realize is this man actually obtained the level of presidency of an entire country, which is one of the most powerful countries in the world. To do that, you have to have some level of high manipulation, psychology. You understand psychotherapy, hypnotherapy. I mean, this guy's mastered all these things. So when you hear people say things like, this guy's just a bumbling idiot, not really, because he obtained the highest seat pretty much in the world, okay? So you have to understand, he's giving and projecting what he wants you to see and what he wants you to believe, but behind the veil, he's a mastermind. He's an absolute mastermind. It's like Kanye West. You think Kanye West, on the outside, he might be a crazy guy, but behind the scenes, the guy is a mastermind. He's masterminded his way to billions of dollars. And build multiple businesses and owns millions of billions of dollars worth of homes all around the world. And so what does that mean? It means that they're projecting something that they want you to see to distract you in one way, and in some way even lower your thoughts or energy or frequency about a situation. And then on the other side, they're manipulating other things behind the scenes. And you can't, because their illusion that they paint is so vast, it escapes the perception of the masses.
Is the greatest generational curse in America actually the lack of discipline, learning?
Well, I'll tell you, our learning system is antiquated. Our learning system and our schooling system is designed around creating people to work in factories, to build an industry for war, right? That's really what it's all about. We're still working on World War I and World War II type education systems. The future of education is going to move and transform in ways that people really don't understand yet. The way that we'll be learning in the future, and I'm not talking about too far away, we'll see other countries do this first, though. It'll go far beyond where we are now. There'll be a device that you'll just sit on your head. It'll be non-invasive. It'll be like a crown, so to speak. It will then be able to transmit information directly into the neocortex and into the mind. And so what they'll do is in stages. So initially what will happen when the first transformation of education comes, you'll see grade schoolers will get from the age maybe 3 to 4, 3 to 5, they'll get a certain amount of information downloaded right into the mind non-invasively. And then they'll go to a school, what we call a school. It'll be really for integration of the actual knowledge, not to learn it, but to learn how to integrate it. And there'll be stages of integration and stages of downloads along the way. And I predict within the next 10 years, a person will have a full 12 years of schooling within probably by the time they're maybe 12 or 13 years old, giving us the advancement that we need to move on as a civilization and advance technologically, scientifically, and even spiritually.
You know, one thing that I want to talk to you about on the other side of this break is the ordinary and the extraordinary. What separates and give one that little extra where they become extraordinary? And I tell you, one of the things I learned about people like you, the president, people who are successful in their spheres, is that this thing called resiliency, and that you have to learn how to adapt to where you are, not where you think you should be, because life is always changing around you. And unless you have the heart of adaptability, and unless you have this thing called resilience, you can have all the skill and all the mindset in the world. It's just not going to work out for you on the level that you want. I want to talk about adaptability and resiliency when we return on Your Voice in Your Future with our guest, Billy Carson.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
See, I want to come back to, I guess, Billy Carson and talk about this resilience and this focus, and how do you stop the feeling of pushing someone into undisciplined action, Billy, and instead convert them into a valuable action that is long-lasting?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, the first thing we have to realize is we have to teach people how to get out of the PTSD mindset. The PTSD mindset is based on trauma, usually something that traumatized a person from the past. And they create these trauma links to those past situations, which prevents them from growing because they take a victim mentality, and that victim mentality always puts them in the mindset of blaming something on the outside why they can't get over the hurdle or get over the hump. Once we move past the PTSD and get out of victimhood and realize that all of us have the power to overcome, and you can empower somebody with the knowledge and the wisdom and understanding, and they can grasp it and act on it, and they can develop something called PTG, post-traumatic growth. That's a different type of a mindset. That's when you shift from the mindset of victimhood and you move into the mindset of utilizing those past traumas and those past situations to catapult you over the hurdles. In other words, you alchemize them. You use them for energy to succeed and elevate. When I was in the third grade, it was a career day, and my third grade teacher had everyone stand up one at a time and say what they wanted to be, what they wanted to do for a living when they grew up, what career did they want. Everyone stood up. I want to be a doctor, I want to be a postman, I want to be a nurse, the typical things you hear. And I just jumped up and said, I want to be famous and I want to be on TV. And the teacher said to me, oh, Billy, you'll never be famous and be on TV. You're poor. Look where you are. Look where you come from. And the whole class laughed at me, and I was embarrassed, and I did cry, but at the same time, that didn't put me into a victim mindset. I dedicated my life to proving that third grade teacher wrong. So I catalyzed and alchemized that negative situation, and I didn't take the victim mindset. I used it to catapult me ahead. And I mean, today I've been on over 200 shows, and I got 2 billion streams on social media and online. And so in some way, that is a direct result of me persevering and showing resilience over someone that tried to pull me down, try to tell me I couldn't be what I wanted to be, try to rob me of my identity and my own belief system and my own imagination. And I didn't go for it because I went with the PTG, post-traumatic growth. Some people would have succumbed to that and would have went into a shell and never became anything, never fulfilled their own dream. So we have to move people from PTSD and victimhood into PTG mindset.
So let me take this conversation to where we are in the world today. You know, you look at these SNAP programs, these government assistance programs, the food stamp program. You know, everybody needs help, but the government should not be a permanent crutch for people where it takes away their skill set, where it takes away their ability to struggle and learn from those struggles. You know, the government may be well-being, but what it has done, it has crippled people for generations. How do we change that?
Well, we first have to look at the way that the system is set up and understand that the system is kind of set up for people that are at a lower level of IQ, a low level of finance, a lower level of maybe abilities. So there are some disabled people. So we have a certain mix of people that fall within the category that will need some assistance and need some help. But then we have people that definitely will abuse the system. There's no way to escape it, no way around it. There are people that definitely will take that system and abuse it. We just need better qualifiers, and we need a better system that allows people that are struggling or in lower income situations to be able to find a job. Now, are there jobs out there? Yeah, but more and more of them are being taken away by AI and automation right now. So we need to put together a system, an online schooling system, to educate the people that are on some of these benefits that are mentally able, physically able to do some tasks and work, and put them in a program. And it can be, these programs are so easy to generate in this minimal input from the admin side. It can be even driven by AI and automation to put these people through some type of a training program to give them the ability to keep working and find something that they can do outside of just sitting in the house and waiting on the next check. I think we have to also empower people. A lot of what's been done through government has disempowered people. Now we need to empower them. In video games and in apps, they call it gamification. People are driven by recognition. They're driven by points and scoring. They're driven to do things on these apps and these programs because they're getting notification, they're getting leaderboards. We need to gamify getting back out there, and that's something that costs almost nothing. You gamify it, you give them the ability to feel special, to feel wanted, to feel deserving. You boost their ego a little bit, and you give them something, a function that they can complete. But again, we should be able to provide this pretty much at almost no cost. And then all of a sudden, you can put them on a requirement to go through this program. And then when they get through the program and they start generating some revenue after the first maybe 60 to 90 days, then you wean them off of that. And now you're weaning off a generation, and then we can continue to wean them off. And now the next generation that comes in from them is probably not going to be relying on that same system. So it's a gradual process of weaning people off of that. You can't just stop it and cut it. You have to put a system in place to allow it to happen.
How important, we do talk often about how the education system failed a lot of these kids, particularly these kids in the inner city and rural areas of our nation. You have a lot of kids who graduate and are illiterate, cannot even read their degree. They go into a life of sexual trafficking, incarceration, at least the homicide. You look at so many of these kids that loot in these stores, they feel they have to steal in order to survive. Can we ever change that through education, where kids can have the skills to fish for a lifetime?
Oh, for sure. Community programs. Right now, there's not enough real, true community programs. I'm talking about real programs or real mentors, real people. Like I go back and I reach back to my people. I go back and reach back to my community. You know, we need more of that. I just did a podcast with somebody from my alumni from Miami Norland Senior High School, Milton Paris. We were just talking about, we had so many guys make it to the NFL and the NBA from our school. We got to sit down in one room with them. We got to get them to go back, not necessarily monetarily, but just physical presence. We have to show up and be there for these kids and show them that there's another way. We got to be there for support, whether it's mental, just being there in their presence and showing them that someone actually cares for them who made it to that level, and that they have a chance and opportunity to make it out as well. And so it's really about mentorship. It's about people going back and giving back, not just monetarily, but just physical, actual presence. And I'm talking about really the men. We really need to go back to these communities and show up and organize programs that can put these kids in a different type of a mindset. For example, Milton, he did something where he did a career day, but not the school career day. He did a career day for people that are alumni that made it out. And so we all came back with a varying different genre of businesses and opportunities to show them it's not just a typical standard templated way that you can go and get a job and try to pay your bills. There's many things you can do. Of course, I came in with content creation and social media presence and things like that. And, you know, I became very successful doing that, became a multimillionaire doing that. So just showing them that there's more than one way that you can skin a cat, but being there for them mentally and even spiritually and uplifting them. And I think that when you around them like that and you show them that there's other opportunities and then there's this communication going on a consistent basis, we can help guide them away from those other nefarious activities and keep them on the right track, you know, and keep them from wanting to get on Snap BBT and all these other things just because they saw relatives doing it. And I mean, keep in mind as well, out of the 390 million Americans, 190 million are adults, and 35% of those, 35.5% are Caucasian, and out of that, we have roughly close to 16% of the population now are African Americans, and only 25% of that are actually on SNAP BBT. And then from there, it goes down to 6% registered Latinos, and then further down, other races. So just understanding the pyramid here, African Americans are not at the top of that pyramid.
You know, we have a minute left. One thing that you make it clear is that men need to show up in the lives of these kids, in the classroom, in the schools, in the homes, in the communities, in the churches, because listen, that is a critical component of passing on generational success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to. We are like the foundation stones, right? And when you look at the world, I know a lot of people say, well, we don't need men. Well, if you don't need men, then we wouldn't have buildings, we wouldn't have high rises, we wouldn't have factories, we wouldn't have so many things that we have. Men do a lot of the most dangerous work that exists on this planet. We risk our lives, we don't live as long. We put a lot of effort out there, but also beyond that, we also bring a lot of wisdom. That's why when an old man dies, a library burns to the ground.
And that is, Billy, it is always a pleasure. I cannot thank you and Bobby Kennedy III enough for joining us for this edition on Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams.